A British man is dead and more than 24 others were injured after a Singapore Airlines flight hit severe turbulence over the Indian Ocean. The plane was forced to make an emergency landing in Bangkok after it suddenly dropped into an air pocket and hit rough air currents. 2 Canadians were on board. Briar Stewart has more.
These were the moments after a Boeing 777 flying from London to Singapore was forced to make an emergency landing in Thailand. Some of the 211 passengers on board were carried off on stretchers. Others were triaged and treated on the tarmac of the airport after they were violently thrown around the plane when it hit severe turbulence.
It was instantaneous. It really was. And horrible.
Jerry was traveling with family to a wedding in Australia.
It went so sudden, there was no warning at all. And I ended up hitting my head on the ceiling, my wife did. Some poor people who were walking around ended up doing somersaults.
A 73-year-old British passenger died of a suspected heart attack. People not buckled in slammed into the overhead bins, denting some and causing oxygen masks to fall. The crew was serving breakfast at the time and was particularly vulnerable.
The seatbelt sign came on, and as soon as I saw it, I put my seatbelt on. And at that very moment, the plane just suddenly dropped. The thing I remember the most was just the objects and things flying through the air.
Passengers said the turbulence lasted seconds.
We do not know exactly what happened in this event.
Captain Shem Momquist has flown the 777 and is a safety investigator. He says in warm tropical places like Myanmar, where this plane hit severe turbulence, storms form differently than they do in places like North America and may not be visible to the pilots.
It is very likely that the storm will just not present itself at all on the radar, and the pilots will suddenly notice at the very last minute, hey, we have something in front of us.
Which is why he urges passengers to wear their seatbelt throughout a flight. Because while what happened is extremely rare, there may be little warning. An investigation is underway to determine what caused the plane to drop, but experts say that climate change is causing more turbulence. One group of researchers from the UK predict that in the coming decades, severe turbulence caused by changing jet streams could double or even triple. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Okay, let's get more on this now, and for that we're joined by former pilot and aviation consultant Keith Mackey. He is the president of Mackey International, an aviation consulting firm specializing in safety and risk management. We reach him tonight in Ocala, Florida. So thanks for being here, Keith. Walk me through what most likely happened in this scenario.
Well, good evening, Trevor. As reported, this was a case of what we call clear air turbulence. And because the air is clear, we can't detect it on radar. Radar detects rain, but there is no rain associated with this. So it's a sudden event, and it's usually caused by the movement of 2 different bodies of air at different speeds. And it is rather sudden. There's no predicting it necessarily, and that's why it's really imperative passengers wear their seatbelts while they're seated.
Yeah, and you hear that announcement often, the seatbelt sign goes off, but you're encouraged to wear your seatbelt. This is probably one of the reasons why. You are a former pilot, as I said in the intro. How common is this phenomenon, and have you ever experienced any turbulence like this?
I've never experienced turbulence that severe, and it is not that common. I would say we have 3 or 4 events of it a year that are notably of public note, but it isn't a common thing. And generally it happens on long-range flights at higher altitudes that are not able to detect the situation and accidentally hit it.
So once a pilot is in this pocket, so to speak, is there any way for them to mitigate how violent the turbulence is on the aircraft?
Usually it doesn't last for very long. Mm-hmm. Each aircraft has a turbulence penetration speed. So it'd be important to either slow or raise the speed of the airplane to hit that speed so that you have the most protection against damage from turbulence. But that's not going to solve the problem. you know, when we're flying on long trips, you can't leave the seatbelt sign on forever because people have restrooms. So you have to turn it off, and people sometimes get a false sense of security that it's okay to walk about and relax a little bit, and that's what bites them. I would postulate that if all the people had their seatbelts fastened, we would not have had any of those injuries that we described. The flight service crew is particularly vulnerable. In this situation, they were serving breakfast, and they're up and about, moving about, and their ability to keep from being injured is very limited as opposed to someone strapped in a seat.
Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with, you know, aircraft design. As I said, you're a former pilot and aviation consultant. But is there anything that the airlines are looking at in terms of the design of planes moving forward that would help deal with this kind of phenomenon?
Well, not necessarily deal with this. The focus is on cost of operation and fuel consumption and keeping the aircraft as cheap to operate as possible. There's really no protection against this. You can hit it inadvertently, and there's not going to be any major design change that's going to make it go away.
Right. So this is just one of the risks that come with flying. You know, there have been reports, and some experts have said that this phenomenon is becoming more prevalent because of climate change. Do you think that is the case, and do you think turbulence is getting worse for flyers?
No, I don't see any evidence of that. If the events are more common, it is because there are more flights, there's more people flying, and the exposure to clear air turbulence is proportional to the number of hours you spend in the air. So I don't think it's because anything's changing in the climate, it's just we're flying more.
Indeed we are. Keith, appreciate the time tonight and the analysis. That is Keith Mackey, who is the president of Mackey International, joining us from Ocala, Florida.